Hello everybody, my name is Adam Clery. Welcome to FourFourTwo and Mikel Arteta. It's happened again. Now, of course, it is only the first leg of the Carabao Cup semi-final. Nothing has been won or decided yet, but I think that performance by Newcastle United might have a shout as being the best one ever under Eddie Howe. When you factor in the opposition, the graft, the work rate, the occasion, what was at stake, every little thing like that, I certainly think it's in the conversation. But how did they do that? Well, in nerd speak, it's because it was one of the most effectively adaptive tactical performances I have seen so far this season. That and the ball, apparently. Right, so here were your two teams. Newcastle United were without 𝗕𝗫𝗓𝗍𝗓, without whom, since he signed for the club, they've never actually won a game of football. And that's true, by the way. He's missed 7 games. They've lost 4, drawn 3, or something like that. And they were without Fabian Schär, who was very handsome. For Arsenal, there were 2 points of note. Firstly, 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓 Trossard was shunted all the way to the right-hand side because of the injuries to Bukayo Saka and 𝗕𝗫𝗓𝗓𝗓, and they had Kai Havertz up front because Alexander Isak plays for Newcastle. But from the very moment those team sheets were handed in, you could see exactly what Newcastle's game plan was going to be, because the obvious replacement is the industry, the work rate, the positional discipline, and the selflessness of Sean Longstaff, who was previously playing that position before they rejigged and put Tonali in the 6. But it wasn't him, was it? It was Joe Willock. And what does Joe Willock give you besides the immortal line, "Come on, you Maggies"? Well, he gives you ball progression up the length of the pitch. He gives you good movement in the final third, and he gives you a really excellent high pressing option. And those 3 things are precisely, in the first half, what Newcastle were doing. Like, it's a little bit spotty and certainly not the most dramatic one I've ever used, but if you look at Willock's heat map from that first 60 minutes that he was playing, you can see all of that in action, because they did have to sit deep and they did have to drop in because Arsenal are really, really good and they're playing at home. But when they did get out, boy, did they get out. And of course, the key to that getting out was, I'm not going to shock you here, Alexander Isak. Like, I've got no qualms whatsoever about saying that 𝗕𝗫𝗓𝗓𝗓 and 𝗓𝗊𝙍𝗓 are the best centre-back pairing in the Premier League. Yes, that was on purpose. They routinely bully Haaland when they play him, both on and off the ball, but neither of them seem to have a clue what to do with Isak here. Like, this is his heat map from the game as well. It doesn't really tell you too much, but it does show you just how frequently he was dropping away from the forward line and receiving the ball sort of in these pockets. And what made all this movement so effective was the variation he had in it, because sometimes when Newcastle were in transition, he would look to be the one that made the runs in behind so they could find him with the ball. You can see him skipping through here quite happily. And when he did do that, if he got one-on-one with either of them, he showed that he was more than capable of going by them, which means they've got to be very cautious about how tight they get. But then on top of that, in a lot of transitions where you would expect him to be making a lot of runs, you would actually remain static and allow players to go beyond him so he could drop off and get on the ball. So it was impossible to know exactly where to be or exactly how to defend against him. Like, this moment with Jacob Murphy is just an unreal bit of play, right? You can see as Newcastle win the ball, Arsenal are a little bit all over the place. Like, this is the shape of their back four. So Isak could very easily make a run into this space. And if you look, you can actually see Saliba, I think, starting to anticipate that. Like, he knows there is a gap to Isak, but he starts to drop off all the same, I think, because he's expecting that run. But then instead, he suddenly comes short and finds himself here. He's got loads of space to turn, and now Saliba doesn't really know what to do. Like, instinctively, in this situation, if you're a centre-back, you want to rush out and put the pressure on that player to stop them playing forward, to try and turn them around and go back to their own goal. But Saliba's a very intelligent defender, and Arsenal work on these things during the week. They'll have known that a hallmark of Newcastle's play are these long bursting runs from all the midfielders. So we can already see you've got Joelinton, you've got Murphy, you've got Willock, all beginning to run into that gap behind Arsenal. And if he overcommits there, if he jumps forward, he possibly leaves space for one of them to get into. So now he's kind of stuck. He should have gone in the first place, but but he didn't, and now he can't really drop off too much, but he also can't go and challenge for it. Godron will get on his bike at some point. 𝗘𝗫𝗧's got a great engine, so if he overcommits and he doesn't win the ball, and possibly even again Isak skips by him, he'll just leave an enormous amount of space. So instead, he's got to then drop off, despite the fact there's nobody anywhere near him. And because of this sort of indecision, this impossible situation he's in, just gives Isak all the time in the world to play this frankly pornographic pass to 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏. And were it not for this frankly brilliant, I'm deadly serious, foul by 𝗕𝗓𝗓, Murphy likely rolls this back to Isak here, and he's got a really good chance. And I do genuinely want to highlight that pullback as quite a good thing, because this is the sort of team Arsenal have needed to become over the last 12 months. You've got to take a risk here and there. You can't just be a soft touch. Yes, if he gets caught by the referee, that is a really dangerous free kick, 25 yards from goal, and a yellow card, but he's let him go. He's lost him. Isak's in a really good position here, and if that ball comes back, the chance he's going to get is much better than a 25-yard free kick, so do it. But he gets away with it, so it's a really smart bit of play, and so, by extension, is this. I feel like I'm going mad here, but I've genuinely seen quite a lot of hand-wringing over this, and I need bigger air quotes than I can do with my hands, push by Isak on 𝗕𝗓𝗓. Yeah, okay, a really, really fussy referee might disallow a goal for something like that, but there's no appeal from 𝗕𝗓𝗓 whatsoever, so he clearly doesn't even think it's a foul. So if you can buy yourself the yard required to score a goal by just gently putting your hands on somebody's back and getting away with that, also brilliant. These are two examples of teams taking liberties with the rules to try and win a massive game of football. If anything about either of those pictures upsets you in any way, then that is a you problem. Go and have a bottle of milk, you baby. Anyway, yes, Alexander Isak's movement. That's what we were talking about. Obviously, it's just good striker's instincts in that first goal. He buys himself, a little bit of space, finishes nicely with his left foot. But the second goal, that's what we're talking about. Here he is, standing completely idle, being marked by both centre-backs. And maybe I'm getting carried away here, but does it look to anybody else like even their body language looks quite unsettled? Maybe I've entirely made that up, but also maybe not. But as before, he darts into the gap between Arsenal's lines, and neither of the defenders feel confident getting drawn out with him. Just to remind you, he showed in the first half he's capable of beating them one-on-one, so smartly, it's not a criticism of them, I think they're doing the right thing, they're trying to avoid ending up in a situation where they come out of the back line, he skips around them, and he's in. This is Joe Willock in. If you recall back 5 or 6 minutes ago when I said it, why is Joe Willock in the team? Movement in the final third. He makes that run the opposite way to Isak, and that draws Arsenal's back line a little bit deeper and creates this pocket of space. And this is an unreal pick out by 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏. It looks like a fairly routine pass at first, but if you just pause it at the moment he strikes the ball, he cannot see Isak. He does not know for definite that he's going to get into this space, but also he does know for definite that he's going to get in this space, because having an understanding and a partnership is a tangible, worthwhile thing. At some point in the very near future, Newcastle are going to go out and spend something like £50 million on a really nice, exciting, shiny new right winger that they've been desperate for years. And in every way, I imagine he will be technically superior to 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏. But you cannot buy an understanding between two players like these two seem to have. And it might come, don't get me wrong, you'd hope it would, but on day one, he will not have that. And genuinely, intangibles like that are worth something. To Newcastle this season, they've been worth 7 goals. Anyway, yeah, touch is class, shot is class, and Godron just gambles on where it's going a fraction quicker than Timber, and that's how it got to be 2-0. But how it stayed 2-0, that's what we're really here to talk about. Because the adaptive strategy that Eddie Howe employed in this game, I think, is maybe the single greatest thing I've seen him do from the touchline. Genuinely really impressive. So around the hour mark, Kai Havertz somehow misses this chance. He should just put it in, but the ball hits his face. And Eddie Howe immediately turns to his bench and decides, right, okay, we've got something really good here. I'm not going to let us chuck it away. About 3 minutes later, off come Murphy, Isak and Willock to be replaced by Longstaff, Kelly and Barnes. Why those three specifically? Well, in the first half, those were Newcastle's three most aggressive players in the press. Like, they were jumping between a high press and sitting quite deep. But when they were putting the squeeze on Arsenal, you can see here it's Isak, it's Murphy and it's Willock who are predominantly leading it. And that means two things, right? First of all, it's just in their mindset. They find themselves drawn to making these kind of runs and applying this kind of pressure. So you take them off, you curb the side's most sort of undisciplined instincts, if that makes sense. And secondly, they'll also be the most tired. Like, just in the last 7 days, Newcastle have been away to both Tottenham and Manchester United and spent large chunks of the second half of both of those games not really seeing the ball. And it is very hard and very tiring to play football when you do not have the ball. But more importantly than all of that, this change also, just spread these lads out a bit, changed the shape. Lloyd Kelly coming on meant that Newcastle now had a back five with four in front and Anthony Gordon left all on his own to go and chase things down. But even that only lasted about 10 minutes. After a particularly leggy gallop up and down the pitch, he was replaced by Miguel Almiron, who, and I could not believe I saw him do this when I watched it in the pub, like I genuinely went, really loudly, went 5-5. And that is mad. But just to give you a little bit of context here, right, see if I can do these quick enough. Arsenal, just like Newcastle, they play with a 4-3, hurry up Adam, 3, don't they? Well, no, actually, of course they don't, because when they're defending, that single pivot becomes a 2, both the wide players drop right back, 𝗕𝗫𝗓𝗓, whoever's in the midfield, goes and presses up with the centre forward, and they defend, actually, in a 4-4-2. And then even when they get forward quite successfully, this 3 becomes a 5, because you get loads of support from everywhere else. They end up having 2 of them in the middle, and it becomes a 3-2-5. And they've got loads of ways of making that happen. Sometimes that's a centre-back, sometimes that's a full-back, sometimes that's a full-back. They make this shape and this sort of amount of bodies appear in the final third. And if you're an Arsenal fan, you're watching this, yes, that is a grotesque oversimplification of how Arsenal play, but it's just to show that for whatever shape they have, they tend to at least have 5 players in the attacking line. And Newcastle, in the first half, were already adapting to this quite well, because if you imagine they've got 4 at the back, that does leave them a little short man for man here. Whenever Arsenal successfully played through the press and had to sit a little deeper, they were going to a flat 4-5-1, but they were adapting it already into a back 5, depending on how Arsenal formed their front 5. Like, it was really, really good. Basically, if they pushed 𝗕𝗓𝗧𝗏 all the way up to be the 5th player in this line so they could let 𝗕𝗏𝗓𝗓 drift a little deeper, then Jacob Murphy would come all the way back and they'd form the 5 that way. But Arsenal are very good. They have more than one way to skin the proverbial cat. Sometimes one of the defenders would go into this space and 𝗕𝗏𝗓𝗓 would be in that front line. So when they did that, instead, Murphy would stay where he was and Joe Linton would drop into like this left centre-back area. And for the first 50, 60 minutes, that worked really, really well. But Arteta is an excellent reactive manager to what's going on in front of him. He makes very positive, very smart changes. So when the second goal goes in, he changes it. He brings Jorginho and Jesus on for Trossard and Partey and basically just goes, the hell with it. 3-1-6. They pushed 𝗕𝗓𝗏𝗏 up permanently. They pushed 𝗕𝗏𝗓𝗓𝗓 up permanently. And it's basically a numbers thing. Like, you're trying to create an overload by having 5 in that line, but Newcastle are demonstrating that they're capable of dropping into a 5 and stopping you doing that. So how do you beat a 5? With a 6. So the reason Miguel Almiron comes on going 5-5, lads, is because Newcastle's solution to this was to go to a natural back 5 with then 3 quite robust central midfielders in front of them. And you combine that with fresh legs, both on the left and the right. And this is virtually impossible. If everybody does their part and doesn't make a mistake and sort of keeps the lines nice and compact, that's virtually impossible to play through. So all you can do in that situation is sort of pass the ball around and start humping long, aimless, hopeful crosses into the box, which is normally quite a good idea for Arsenal because they're very good in the air. But now, Newcastle not only have 3 centre-backs, one of which is the same height as the flipping Big Show, but also 3 nigh on 6 foot or above robust central midfielders, and also Tino Livramento's quite big. So Newcastle, aerially here, are not worried. And then, just to make matters worse, Newcastle are still more than capable of dropping Joe Linton into this back five to make it a 6, with then 4 quite happily in front of it. And just, there was nothing Arsenal could do about this. Like, Newcastle won 75% of all the aerial duels. So you can't play through them and you can't play over them. They cleared the ball in this game 48 times, 40 of which were in the second half alone. Like, as a robust, and I keep saying adaptive defensive performance. Because remember, they started the game pressing Arsenal really high, and they just went back to this as Arsenal made changes themselves. It's one of the just most committed and impressive defensive displays I think I've seen all this season. Like, 𝗦𝗶𝗴𝗍𝗀 did not make one save in that entire second half. For all the ball and all the territory and all the possession, all the crosses, all the chances, everything, they didn't actually test the goalkeeper. Because I think it would be very easy to look at that and be like, oh, Eddie Howe just went really defensive. Oh, it was actually quite a negative thing to do. But, like, it's such a dramatic and obvious change in tactics. He took Alexander Isak off after an hour. He took Anthony Godron off after 70 minutes. He set this up so deliberately. If it had backfired, if Arsenal had got a single goal or maybe even equalised, that is all on him. And because when you look at something like this on a screen, it's just so dramatically mental, you would never just say like, oh, well, you know, Arsenal are a better side, they broke through eventually. You would go, no, he sat too far back. He did this crazy thing, and they went from 2-0 up to drawing 2-2. Like, that takes balls, man. Just enormous balls. And not to overly stress this point, right, but Eddie Howe gets a lot of criticism for his substitutions and his tactical nous. So he's seen as a very good motivator and he sets his teams up well. But in terms of being one of these elite managers that can influence things from the sidelines and do stuff like this, that's not really how people think of him. So if he'd done this and it had backfired, whoa, that's a lot of scrutiny to put yourself under. But he did it. He genuinely thought that was a good way to hang on to that 2-0 lead, and it was. Like, you can say what you want about Arsenal maybe not having a bit of luck, and on another day one of those chances maybe goes in, but I only deal in facts. I can only talk about facts, and it finished 2-0, and they did that, and the two things are related. Just proper British 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 eggs and chips defending. You love to see it. So, yes, that's how Newcastle United beat Arsenal again. And before I go, someone has already done the research on the ball and whether or not that makes any difference to Arsenal. And no, it doesn't. He doesn't actually think that. He said it because that's now 2 disappointing results in a row, and there's a few big players underperforming, and they may come in for some unnecessary scrutiny or pressure. So if you're a manager, this is straight out of the Mourinho playbook, you say a mad thing, you say an insane thing, and all the focus then goes on to you. Nobody is talking about the underperformances now. Everybody's talking about the ball. It's good management. But as ever, I'm sure the response to this will be very reasonable and balanced and sane. Please let me know what you made of the game and your thoughts on the second leg, because nobody's won anything yet. I'm certainly not booking any hotels for Wembley, mostly because I live in London and wouldn't have to. But let me know what you think's going to happen in the second leg in the comments down below. And of course, don't forget to like the video, share it with your pals, that's nice, and subscribe to us here on FourFourTwo, because more subs is more good, in my opinion. You get me across all the social medias at Adam Clery, 𝗘𝗫𝗍𝗧, where you can possibly even read a thing I wrote about why Alexander Isak never scores with his left foot, which I published precisely one day before he scored with his left foot. So for more searing insight like that, that's Adam Clery, 𝗘𝗫𝗍𝗧, Twitter, Instagram, I forget what they're all called. I'm there, I'm everywhere. Until next time though, thank you very much for joining us. That was an immensely enjoyable game for me, a Newcastle fan, to watch. But hopefully you found the analysis fair and impartial and level-headed and not getting carried away with anything. We're going to win the cup! Bye. 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 Bye.